What's up, everybody? Welcome into this Tuesday edition of the Pack-A-Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. I hope this podcast finds you well. I hope you're in good health. I hope you are enjoying this Packers season as much as I am. And I guess ultimately how much we enjoy this Packers season really comes up to how the rest of the season goes and how this second half of the season goes, and if the Packers can achieve their ultimate goal of winning the Super Bowl. Doesn't necessarily mean if they don't win a Super Bowl that we can't enjoy the ride along the way, but I think you and I and a lot of other people in Packers Nation are certainly hopeful that this could be a special team that, could ultimately end holding up a championship trophy and bringing that Lombardi back to Green Bay. If that's to be the case, however, I do think Green Bay has some work to do. I don't think I'm surprising you by saying that. And I think there are, in my opinion, 6 things that Green Bay really has to focus on through the remainder of this season if they want to reach their goal and ultimately be hoisting a Lombardi Trophy. So I'm going to be going through those 6 things today, not in really any particular order, but I'll go through 1 through 6 and label what I think is kind of the checklist on the Packers to-do list if they want to reach the Holy Land at the end of this NFL season. So number 1, and it's very clear and it's very obvious, and I'm not giving you anything earth-shattering for number 1 here. It's get healthy and stay healthy. And that includes from a COVID standpoint, that includes from an injury standpoint. There are a lot of unique circumstances with this individual NFL season. Green Bay has to somehow find a way to navigate those waters, especially in a place like Green Bay where the COVID cases are through the roof, especially on a per capita basis. So there's a lot going on, and it's always a war of attrition, no matter what in any given season. If you lose your top players, the 49ers are a fantastic example of this, and there's other teams that you can certainly point to as well. But the 49ers, an NFC championship team, a Super Bowl contender a season ago, really maybe a solid Jimmy Garoppolo pass in the end of the game last year away from winning a Super Bowl to now being a complete shell of themselves due to the issues with not only COVID that they had, but a lot of the injury issues as well. So Green Bay's got to find a way to navigate that, get their players that are out back and healthy and in playing condition, because that's something that gets lost in the shuffle as well. Take Kenny Clark, a great example of this. You see that Kenny Clark comes back from injury, and in our minds, we just immediately go, perfect. Kenny Clark's back and everything's back to normal. But if you look at Kenny Clark this season, he is anything but back to normal. His last 3 seasons, he has been dominant, consistently one of my highest graded players on defense. In fact, I think he was my highest graded defender in 2017, in 2018, my second highest rated defender in 2019, and right now he's graded in the negative. So just because he's back on the field and technically healthy doesn't mean that he's 100% and making the same sort of impact. So as Green Bay gets players like Allen Lazard and Kenny Clark and David Bakhtiari, it's not just being back on the field, but it's being back and being effective. And I think that's what's really going to be so important for the Packers as this second half of the season starts and as they go into their playoff push. Number 2 on my list is really defining roles and figuring out the best way to utilize specific players. And in this case, I'm really talking about a few unique positions. I think the first one is inside linebacker. We've now seen Kamal Martin, Christian Kirksey, Chris Barnes, Ty Summers, Oren Burks at times. We've seen Raven Green and Will Redmond used in kind of those hybrid type of roles. But now, when everyone's back healthy, what is your best setup to be most productive at that inside linebacker position? Christian Kirksey brings a lot to the table from a leadership standpoint. He knows where he's going to be. He knows where he needs to be. You don't have to do a ton of coaching with him. He's going to be where he's expected to be. He's maybe not going to come up with a lot of those flash plays, but he's somebody that has the ability to make those calls, get everything communicated, and get everyone on the defense on the same page. But again, maybe not the flash plays, maybe not the splash plays that you might see from some of the younger players with maybe a bit more speed and athleticism. Thought Ty Summers and Oren Burks both coming off their best games as Green Bay Packers against the 49ers. And don't look now, but somehow Oren Burks back-to-back positive graded games. I really liked what I saw out of him this last week. He did blow a coverage later in the game, but he's an interesting player. If all of a sudden something clicks with him, how does Green Bay utilize him? Another position that I really want to take a look at is safety, and not necessarily anyone taking the roles from Darnell Savage or Adrian Amos, but how do you want to utilize both of those players? I really liked what Mike Pettin did against San Francisco, using Darnell Savage in more of like a robber role, playing him closer to the line of scrimmage, putting him in position to make plays and read the quarterback and use his athleticism. I think that's a great role for Darnell Savage, and I think Adrian Amos is capable of really doing anything at safety, so he can be kind of your player that stays back a little bit more, is maybe the safe guy making the safe tackles and making sure you're not allowing big plays. Maybe let Darnell Savage go and be a little bit more of that playmaker. I'd like to see that figured out as the season goes along. And then really that number 3 receiver. Devontae is going to be your 1. Allen Lazard's going to be your 2. Do you want MVS to be that 3 and kind of be the core guy that's getting those number 3 wide receiver snaps? Or do you want Tyler Ervin on the field a little bit more? I think you got to just figure out some of these ways to get your best players on the field and what's the best way to ultimately make your team successful. I think inside linebacker, safety, and maybe that slot wide receiver type position are really the ones that might be most interesting as the season progresses. Number 3 on my list, overcoming adversity. I wholeheartedly believe that if Green Bay wants to win a Super Bowl at some point this season, they're going to have to overcome something. I never thought they really had to overcome anything last year. They were almost always healthy. They never lost 2 games in a row. There never seemed to be any tension inside the team. So far this season, it's really been the same. You know, it almost seems like they're, once again, the team that's been catching the breaks with injuries. The 49ers have been obliterated by injuries. The Jaguars will not have Gardner Minshew this week. It seems like week by week, they're kind of getting the benefit of the other team being more banged up than what the Packers are. All right, no 2 losses in a row. Once again, no real internal struggle. That's usually not the case. Usually at some point, if you want to be a championship team, there's got to be something that you have to overcome. And in some ways, as I mentioned to Alex and Perry on Monday's episode of the Pack-A-Day podcast, I'm kind of concerned about the remainder of the schedule because I'm not sure it has the top-end team that can really sharpen this Packers team and really go against one of these top-level teams to kind of measure them up and see, you know, what they're going to be going up against in the playoffs. Yes, you have some tough teams you're going to be facing. You know Chicago's going to play you hard in their 2 games. Detroit, while not a great team, has been a team that Green Bay struggled against. They almost lost to David Blau at quarterback with the Lions just a season ago. You know the Colts are going to play them hard. You know the Titans are going to play them hard. Even the Panthers, they just almost beat the Chiefs a week ago. So that's not going to be an easy game. Really, the only game that I look at on this schedule that's quote-unquote maybe easy is this home game against the Jaguars. They're like, 14-point favorites going into this game and should win it easy. The rest of the games, you don't face a top-end team, but you don't face any really bad teams either. So it's an interesting schedule, but do you have the team that's going to sharpen you and really get you ready for the playoffs? Either way, I do think Green Bay needs to go through some adversity so they know what's going to be facing them in the playoffs. They continue to sharpen themselves and continue to get better as the season goes along. Number 4 on my list, get that bye week. I think finishing number 1 is so incredibly important for Green Bay. With having the earlier bye in the season, I think they're going to need that time to get healthy and get ready for the postseason. I think that bye more than ever is going to be so important with only having one of them this year. We've seen the importance of it in recent seasons, and I think Green Bay set up in a good spot. I think they have a relatively easy schedule that we just went through. I think if you look at the NFC West, I think that team's going to completely beat up on each other with really the Cardinals, the Rams, and the Seahawks. I think the NFC South, I think the Saints and Bucks, we've already seen them kind of take each other out a little bit, and I think you'll see them maybe accumulate a few more losses. Tampa's already a game down in that loss column, so I think this is really there for the taking with Green Bay. They're going to have the tiebreaker when it comes to the Saints. As I mentioned, I think the NFC West takes themselves out. So hopefully the Green Bay is able to put themselves in a great position to get that number 1 overall seed and home field advantage. And again, more importantly, that bye as they go into the playoffs. Number 5, they've got to find a defensive identity. And I realize that Mike Pettine's goal has been to not allow those explosive plays, allow maybe your team some more chances to get your hands on the football, maybe create some turnovers or force the other team to go the length of the field. But for the most part, opposing offenses have not had trouble in doing that. And I think you've got to find something you can hang your hat on. Are you a great run defense? Are you a great pass defense? Can you force a lot of turnovers? Can you get a ton of pressure? Right now, none of those things are really coming up for the Packers, and I think they've got to find something that they can hang their hat on and be great at defensively when postseason comes along. Last year, the pressure was really their key, especially as the season went along. And if they can get pressure on opposing quarterbacks, they can be a very good defense. And that really leads me into my number 1 on this list. I mentioned it to Perry and Alex the other day on the Pack-A-Day podcast, and that's this season to me is going to come down to the 4 key players on the front 4 of that, or the front of that defense. And that's Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, Kenny Clark, and Rashawn Gary. I tweeted out during training camp, I thought those 4 had the ability to be the next New York Giants front, the Michael Strahan, Matthias Kiwanuka, Osi Umenyiora, and Justin Tuck. I thought they could be in that group from a pressure standpoint. I thought they could be solid against the run. Kenny Clark's been amazing the last 3 seasons. Zadarius Smith was otherworldly a season ago. Preston Smith was everything that they wanted and more. And we've started to see some of the flashes from Rashawn Gary. But at some point, all 4 of those have been disappointments so far this season. And to me, this offense for Green Bay is going to click. This secondary is good enough. I think they're going to get more consistent play from that inside linebacker group as players get healthy and they figure out really who their best players are in certain situations and circumstances as the season goes along. I've seen flashes from this run defense, and I think you look at players like Montrevious Adams, Tyler Lancaster, Dean Lowry, Kingsley Keke. If you can get those 4 just to focus on stopping the run along with those inside linebackers and allow the rest of those top 4, Gary, Clark, Zadarius, and Preston, to be more the pass rushing group, I think you've got a formula there. But those top end players at the front of the defense have to make an impact. Z's got to be better. Preston's got to be better. Kenny's got to be better. Rashawn's got to be better. If those 4 can step up and start getting pressure again, you'll see the pressure come, you'll see the sacks come, you'll see the fumbles come, you'll see the interceptions come, you'll start seeing those turnovers come in bunches, and this team can legitimately win a Super Bowl. It's 1A on the list. Those players have to perform at peak levels if this team wants to win a Super Bowl, but we just saw it, maybe say for Rashawn Gary, a season ago, and I think even if 3 out of the 4 of those guys can really start playing consistent football and playing at the top of their games, this is going to be a very, very difficult team to beat come January and February. That does it for me. Thanks so much for taking the time and tuning in each day. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe, like, do whatever you can, tell a friend. I greatly appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time, and until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.